There we have the dulcet tones of that rather cheesy FM piano there. That can only mean one thing. We're looking at the Yamaha ReFace DX, the first, well, in this case, we're looking at this one first, of 4 new small keyboards from Yamaha. Now, why the DX? Well, when we first posted the first look that we had with Bert Smorenberg, who's Yamaha's demonstrator, the DX got far and away the most comments and the most views. So I figured that would be a good place to start. They also got a lot of criticism. I don't know what it is. I think, you know, if any company at the moment releases a new field of keyboards, particularly with Yamaha, because Yamaha haven't actually released anything specifically new for quite some time, you're going to get a lot of stick for it. And stick they certainly did. Now, why did they get a lot of stick? Well, primarily, I think it's because this is mini keys. You know, mini keys, love them or hate them, people get a bit uppity about them, and you know, it definitely seems to make people who are players, obviously used to full-size keys, get a bit stroppy. But let's try and keep that aside for a minute. These are indeed mini keys, velocity sensitive. We've got 1, 2, 3 octave keyboard with no aftertouch, and it uses a very different kind of synthesis architecture. If you're used to subtractive synthesis, this is very different. FM synthesis uses operators. Each of the operators are set to a specific pitch. They're usually a sine wave, and then you can change the way that they interact, because what you're doing is you're modulating operators with other operators to create feedback loops and sort of FM frequency modulation synthesis with a variety of different algorithms. In this case, there are 12 algorithms. When it first reached the mass market with the DX range of synthesizers, it was used everywhere. I mean, you know, aside from the cheesy electric pianos, there are all sorts of other sounds, and some of those sounds are available in here. There are lots of percussive kind of bass sounds. Those kind of classic plucky sounds, which it was also very good for. Hearing the twin effects that are also built into the ReFace DX here. Marimba was, believe it or not, very popular, but it can also do some really mad and otherworldly sounds. Now, not a lot of these sounds are actually available in the DX. There are 32 memories with 4 banks of 8. One thing that I was quite excited about when I heard about it was, will it load some of those old classic, particularly the 80s and 90s, some really sort of classic techno and pop dance bass sounds, which it's very well known for, even a 4-operator synth like this. Unfortunately not, it doesn't load any old patches, unlike some of the other soft synths like Native Instruments FM7, which can load old DX patches. The ReFace DX, you kind of have to start from scratch, which is a bit of a shame because there are literally thousands of patches available to this. But that aside, let's get on to the hardware. So first thing to notice is it's hefty. It's got quite a lot of mass to it. It feels solid. It doesn't wobble about. You can give it a good sort of chunk. The keys actually do feel, for mini keys, feel quite nice. I mean, yes, they're going to take a bit of getting used to. I mean, I'm lucky. I've got very small, freakishly small hands, some may say. I also forgot to mention this is an 8-voice instrument. So 8-voice polyphony is kind of what you get with this. It's got a little pair of 6-watt speakers, I think they are, at each end. Again, this is kind of solid. They sound fine. The next big deal is really the kind of notion that they've got this kind of touch surface. Now, at the moment, these are switches, but if I go to level, which is this one of the 4 quick access here, I've got frequency, level, algorithm, and feedback. They turn into faders. Which are also accessible via MIDI control. Certainly in this instance, they're just straightforward MIDI. If I go to frequency though, it's going to be split controller type parameters, where you have 2 controllers used up, which makes it a little bit more tricky to control via MIDI. But you can record all of this stuff into a sequencer for automation. And this is the cool thing. I mean, with the algorithm and the feedback, we can actually access parameters very quickly for sculpting DX, FM kind of sounds, which is actually quite a novelty because, frankly, if you've ever worked with any of the older generation of DX synthesizer, FM synthesizers, it's legendarily difficult and arcane. And one thing you will notice, if I just initialize a voice here using the function controls, init voice, yes please, and now I've got just a straight sine wave on a single operator. So now if I go into the feedback mode, you can see that we've got the advanced level of feedback where we can go into positive into sort of sawtooth and down into square wave. It's particularly effective in this patch that I created, which is just 2 operators and a square wave pitch, giving it a sort of octave. Got it through a little fuzz effect and some delay. Adjusting the feedback really affects the tone. And while, you know, I think it's much more effective actually when you go off-road with this. I don't think the patches that it comes with really do show off the DX and the FM nature of the synthesizer all that well. I've got a patch here which is something I just created from scratch. Again, using the 2 inbuilt effects. If we just quickly have a look at what's available, we've got flanger, phaser, delay, reverb, through, distortion, touch wah, and chorus. If we just take a look at some of the other parameters available, as well as the basic building blocks of FM, when we go into edit mode, we can access individual parameters for each operator. So we've got quite a lot of potential here. So we've got, we can switch operators on or off, have them in ratio mode or fixed frequency mode. We can set the ratio and the detune. We've also got, this is for all 4 operators. We page through, second page gives us the level, the velocity sensitivity, the feedback, which as I said, goes in square and sawtooth. And finally, the keyboard scaling level, which means that we can kind of scale it in all sorts of different exponential and linear ways, which gives us all these different responses. We've got an envelope generator for each operator, which has rate and level and rate for each one. The only thing that you can't do is access all of the envelopes at the same time. So if you've got a sound you really like, but that uses 4 operators, but you'd like to have it slow and languid, you have to program each one separately. Would it be nice if there was some kind of a way of linking them all together so you could just edit, you know, the lot of envelopes all at the same time? Additionally, we've got a pitch envelope, which again is a 4-stage envelope, and we can switch these in and out on a per operator basis. There's also a single multi-wave LFO, which speed and delay, and again we can switch them on or off for each of the operators, and also it does pitch and amplitude depth. I would have liked to see more destinations on the LFO. In fact, I'd like to see more LFOs as well. We are sticking with a very sort of traditional FM setup. What's wrong with modulating the feedback, for instance? That would be really interesting. Or, you know, the algorithm, any of those kind of things would be kind of a bit different and something a little bit pushing the whole FM thing a bit further along. It seems they're sticking pretty much with the traditional 4-op setup, and that's something that I think they could have possibly gone a bit further with. So let's take a look at the connections here. 12 volt DC input, power switch, sustain pedal in on 1/4 inch jack, stereo output on 1/4 inch jacks again, and we've got 1/4 inch jack phones output, auxiliary in for iPods and other line inputs. Then we've got, coming along, we've got this MIDI on DIN. Now the MIDI on DIN is basically, it comes with this little cable that's a breakout cable that gives you MIDI I/O additional. It looks like some sort of S-video adapter. USB is MIDI only, unfortunately, and it's only a single port, so it's just the whole thing comes out, the keyboard and the controls. It is possible, I just plugged it straight into OS X and it just basically works, so I'm guessing it is class compliant. We flip it over, We've also got this little battery compartment, which takes 6 AA's, so you can power the thing and do the gig on the bus. I'm told it'll last up to 5 hours. Another feature we've got is the looper, which is, it's just a little sort of MIDI pattern generator, but when you start integrating this, certainly with the DX, you kind of start to see the power of this because you can tinker with the sound. So if I go into record, I've got a 1 bar counting. I've got my start, so now the whole thing's just playing. So what I'll just do is start messing around with the sound, and we can see, let's bring a bit of nice bit of chorus. Let's try a bit of, put the delay in. That's nice, and now we can start messing around with things like the feedback, and you can start to hear the sort of, let's mess around with the LFO. Bring a second operator in. Bit of detune. So you've got, you know, straight away I'm in there, I'm messing around. This was just an initialized voice which I put a bit of release on, so it allows me to kind of build up these little musical ideas, and it's in a very different sort of synthesis and sound world to regular synthesizers. So what I quite like about it is, you know, you get, it's very nice. I like it for the sort of mellow, sine tony, kind of modifying the sounds ever so slightly. But where it really comes into its own is when you start hooking up MIDI controllers, because all of these controls transmit some kind of MIDI data. It's not all the same, it's not just MIDI control. Some of them are split bytes, which means that you've got 2 controllers for a parameter, and obviously there's a lot of more than 128 steps in it. You need 2 controllers. One kind of is 127, and then you increment the second controller, and then it becomes more of a range, and so forth and so on. So you can create these massive ranges. This is something that is a little bit more complicated to set up. I'll just show you what I did, and it kind of gives you an idea of maybe what sort of world you can inhabit with the Reface DX. Before we get into that though, a couple of things about the looper. The looper can record up to 32 bars. It doesn't stay in memory, it's just one loop. It's a shame that they didn't actually make it available for each patch, so you could store it and attach it to a patch, but that's not possible. The other thing is also when you're plugging in MIDI, so for instance here I've got the MIDI coming from my controller, I'm just going to plug this in. You can see there that the tempo is set to 120, which is the internal tempo. As soon as I plug the MIDI in, it goes to external. Now the thing is this controller here doesn't actually transmit any tempo, so I can't actually access the looper when I've got an external MIDI plugged in. I couldn't figure out why this was. I mean, maybe this does spit out something that this recognizes as clock, but unfortunately it made it a little more complicated. I suppose if I was hooking up via DAW, I could be sending clock to it, so that would solve that problem. But if I wanted just to use this without a DAW in the way, it's kind of a little bit finicky. Right, so here's how I got it set up. I've got my BCR 2000, which is just a bunch of switches and faders that spit out controller data. What I'm doing here is the bottom row are transmitting positive feedback to Sawtooth. I can only do that because that's doing that split controller thing, so I've got it sending just 0 to 127. Then I've got the pitch fine for each operator, pitch coarse for each operator, and then the top row is just the level for each operator. So I'm just going to play 3 notes. Now I'm coming up to my controller. This is adding some feedback to that first operator. It's kind of like filter, adding those extra harmonics. I bring the second operator in, which is providing feedback loop, giving that beat frequency. add some feedback to that. I could change the coarse frequency of the second operator. Take that down again. Now on operator 3, I've got a slow sample and hold pitch. Which is providing this kind of weird, spooky line. I can maybe add a bit of feedback to that. If I bring the fourth operator in, that's providing the feedback loop to operator 2. So yeah, pretty experimental. I mean, as I said, I couldn't get the looper running to make it more musical because it went into external mode and I had no way to fix the tempo. But you can see that with an external controller, you've got this potential for some really sort of quite interactive and fantastic sort of soundscapes. And it really opens up, together with the effects on here. I think the two effects I have are a chorus and a reverb only, creates this sort of massive, weird world of sound. And when you consider, you know, we've got sort of 4 oscillators there and the interactions between them, and that was with one algorithm, you know, we can get into all kinds of nonsense with it. So I've kind of focused on less of the traditional DX FM kind of sounds here, just because I wanted to explore what it was capable of. And when I'd first seen it, it was I like that kind of dreamy quality. I'm not so interested in the percussive stuff, although it does that absolutely fine. And if you want those kind of sounds, this can definitely do it. It's really down to whether or not this is the sort of thing for you. I mean, I will say, you know, on initial impressions, you know, I know the world was rather up in arms at why this, why that, but yes, okay, it's got mini keys, sure, maybe that was a decision that was questionable, but I like the fact that it's small, it's got quite a lot of capabilities, it's got this whole world of sound, it's hardware, and you can get into that world of FM. I think the downsides are you can't load in old patches, which is such a shame, because there are a lot of things in here that, you know, you could be getting that lately bass, all of those kind of sounds that you might want access to, but you can program them up. Having said that, it's, even though it's much better for programming FM, it's still not all that intuitive. You know, you still have to spend quite a lot of time poking around, and it's not, because FM synthesis is so unusual or alien to many people, it's still going to take a little while to get your head around. So it comes down to price. I know there was a lot of hoo-ha about the price as well, because in the States it was being sort of $500 or whatever. In the UK, I've seen the list price is starting to be shown at something under 300 quid, so maybe 289 UK pounds, which for the quality of the build and the capabilities is actually not a bad deal. I don't know what that's going to translate to street price in the US, but it's definitely quite an attractive proposition. I'm quite tempted myself, just because I don't have any FM, and this can definitely take you into a world that you would not have inhabited before. And it's going to do, you know, those sparkly highs, those really deep basses. It's also capable of those things. So that's the Yamaha ReFace DX. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more of our stuff, please subscribe to our channel.